We are apparently live.
And we're here with Jordan Peele.
With Jordan Peele.
Thanks so much for visiting the class online, Jordan. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate it.
And making this time, buddy. And this is great.
And congratulations to you for all the love you're getting, the Critics' Choice Award and the NAACP Image Award and the Gotham Award and all that. I know it's exhausting. Is this sort of a surreal experience, the Oscar run-up and all that?
It is. It's really surreal. You know, I was working with the project for so long, you know, writing the project for so long, and you sort of think about the best case scenario and the worst case scenario, and, you know, they're both sort of fleeting possibilities, and this was how the best case scenario looked, and the worst case scenario was that I would be run out of the country.
Right.
So it's good.
Well, luckily that didn't happen. I want to talk to you, horror fan to horror fan, for a moment. I know you're a big horror fan, obviously. I've been a lifelong fan. Got it from my mother, who was a civil rights activist. I just wondered, why do you think horror strikes such a chord with us?
With us, with people?
With people, with you, with black people. We can talk about blacks, like what people have said to you about Get Out and the chord it strikes with them, but I just wanted to sort of start with you. What draws you to horror?
So, you know, I'm a fraidy cat, or I was afraid, vivid imagination, bad nightmares, afraid of the dark as a kid. There would be this allure to horror films, if I got to see one, or I got to see like a Fangoria magazine,
yes,
it would affect me for the next 3 weeks, and I'd have a hard time sleeping. At some point, I told a story at like a campfire horror story to a bunch of my peers, and it worked. It really, really worked, and I remember that moment feeling a certain power that helped me conquer my fear. And so, but to really answer your question, why, as a viewer, why I love horror is because we suppress fear. Mm-hmm. It's a human emotion, and we do not deal with it. And horror films is a way for us to face our fears, yeah, and to deal with them. I think that black people have a distinct relationship with horror because, you know, the African American experience is often filled with more horror that we need to deal with, that we need an outlet for. And we're sort of taught to be strong and smart in the face of these fears, and we have to be. But I feel like as a community, it's possible that we've got more fear to deal with, more horror to deal with on this systemic level.
So is that one of the reasons why when you felt that the black community was underserved by horror films, that you specifically wanted to do something that would fit into that gap and provide the same benefit that white people have been providing for their own communities, or Asians have provided for their communities when they create these films that tie into their concerns and their mythos and so forth and so on. You had a very serious intent with Get Out, it seems.
Yeah, and you know, I think that, you know, often it's a stereotype, but it's a true stereotype. The idea of the black horror audience being very vocal in how dumb the lead character is being.
Right.
And I think that comes from a place. I think that comes from this frustration of lack of representation, not just of our skin, but of our sensibility, of our, you know, the first scene in Get Out, where Lakeith is walking down the street. I think that's like the first laugh and release for the audience, specifically the black audience, is the moment he goes, if something doesn't feel right, he goes, nope. He turns around and starts going back the other way.
Right.
Like, that's all we need. That's all we're asking for.
Yes.
The character do what I need him to do. And the brutal sort of nightmare, or I should say the really horrific realization I had in the beginning, in the middle of writing this, and trying to figure out how do you make a movie with a sensible black lead that lasts longer than 5 minutes,
yes,
because he doesn't just get out. The answer I sort of came to is or the realization I had is that you can be black, and part of the black experience of this country is you can do everything right. You can raise your hands. You can go in the other direction. You can avoid danger, and you can still end up in harm's way.
yes.
And so that's what the movie ended up being about. That even though I didn't set out to with that in mind.
Really?
Yeah, I'm dying to ask you a very specific question. You're the first world-class comedian that I've had an opportunity to speak to human being, and you also created a fantastic horror film, which makes me think that your theory of what makes people laugh and how to create a laugh, and your theory of how you make people scream and what horror is, I have this feeling that those two theories might overlap. And I was wondering, can you talk to us about laughter and screams, comedy and horror?
And why there's a good marriage? Yeah.
Yes, that's a great question, and yeah, something I identified early, that the two are so related. They're related rhythmically. They're related in the fact that there's not, if you're doing it right, there's not a lot of leeway in my mind in terms of how much vagueness you can have in your intention of what the audience experience should be. So in comedy, my training is to get the laugh, you're trying to get the big laugh. You're trying to get everybody in that theater at the same time, to laugh at the exact same moment. Yeah. So to get that process, and it's wound tight, and that's how I feel about horror as well. It's not, I feel like often with something maybe dramatic or romantic, you can sort of let the audience go on their individual journeys and pull their associations out from it, as long as by the end of the movie you have them in tears. With horror and comedy, to me, it's regimented, it's specific, and you don't want to leave one audience member behind at any moment.
No.
Would you be kind enough to add some specificity here? Talk specifically about the construction of a joke, and specifically about the construction of a scream moment.
Yeah, to me, the rhythm is that you build tension, you set a pattern, and then you break the pattern. Okay, so in comedy, we essentially will start. We have something called the game of a scene, in improv comedy or sketch comedy. So that would be where if you take the substitute teacher scene in Key and Peele, we sort of he gets the first name wrong.
Yes.
A wrong.
Yes.
Then he gets the next name wrong. We learn that. We get it now. Balake. Okay, we get what he's doing. We set this pattern. By the end of the scene, myself, the one black kid in class, comes out and he goes, I think he goes, Joe Nathan, and I go, present.
Right.
We break it.
Yes.
In horror, I don't know if I have an example as good as that, but there is the energy of setting this pattern. Someone's walking down the hall. Someone hears a noise down the hallway. They start walking to that noise. They hear it again. They walk closer to it. They open the door at the end of the hallway. They look for where the noise came from, and then all of a sudden the creature's right behind them.
Yes.
Right. You use the momentum of the audience against them.
Yes.
It's kind of like judo.
Yes.
And the other answer to your question, Stephen, is that I had so many notes and tones and genres going into this project, and so what I feel strongly about both horror and comedy is that they're only as good as how real they feel. So the most difficult thing to achieve in any type of genre or any kind of story, I feel, is the illusion of reality. This is actually happening. And that goes very wrong with many comedies and horror projects very quickly. And it takes you out, right? The moment you could be watching a perfectly good horror movie, and the one moment where somebody should have called the police and they just didn't, they decided to go back in the house. You go, well, I can't enjoy the movie.
Right.
I can't enjoy the movie. So my due north on the compass was reality. When we're dealing with Missy Armitage and her sort of hypnosis witchcraft thing, I tried to make it feel like real hypnosis. I tried to make it feel like real therapy or psychiatry. With Rod, it's like I knew I was making this movie with Catherine Keener and Little Rel Howery in the same movie, right? So when on the other side of the spectrum with Rod, who is our release valve, he's our you call him the comedic relief, but same due north. If this character feels real, he'll be funny.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If he all of a sudden he says something, we're like, no, nobody would say that though. Then I lose the audience. So the genre that I'm applying both of these things to is actually reality, which merges them, which brings them into the same. Why the movie feels cohesive tonally.
Wow,
great,
fantastic
Thank
answer.
you for that.
That's great.
As you know, there was a party not long ago. Universal had the fan art from Get Out. A lot of the depictions were of the Sunken Place and those memes with Daniel Kaluuya. I was just wondering, because obviously it's such a powerful allegorical language to express what our experience has been under white supremacy. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about the Sunken Place for this class, what it means to you, and also what it seems to mean to the world.
Well, yeah, I get asked about the Sunken Place a lot. It resonates clearly more than any other single idea in this film. And I was very taken by the fact that fans made art about it. And part of that, to me, suggested that there was something really welcome or really needed in the idea of the expression of a black man in fear, in pain, and in sorrow. Mm-hmm. I think that that's something that black men have not been. We have not been allowed to be portrayed in that way for probably many reasons, but I think it's a similar reason. Even when Denzel Washington had his beautiful performance, beautiful scene in Glory, that vulnerable scene where a tear rushes down his face, it's cinematically cathartic moment, and I think it's similar to what Daniel's performance in the moments leading up to the Sunken Place. There's this defiance of the notion of bearing his soul, of being vulnerable that both portray. Denzel's looking right through Matthew Broderick as he's getting whipped, and the tear rolls down his cheek. Daniel he's sitting in the chair. He's like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to open up. And then he gets opened up.
Yes.
Anyway, so I think that for me is why one of the reasons it really resonated, that emotionally, that moment and that image of Daniel's face. But sort of going into the Sunken Place itself as a concept, I was never the type of person who would be talking about the system and systemic racism. I was much more, I think I looked at racism in terms of individuals and how individuals perpetuate it. And writing this movie really opened my eyes. And when I wrote that scene, I started crying. And the reason I started crying was because I realized how big and how seemingly unsurmountable systemic racism is. It involves so many different perpetrators. It involves us, the victims. It involves, and it comes in so many different forms. So the forms that, systemic, the sunken place to me is the prison industrial system, which is, the dark holes that would throw Black men and women and take away their freedom and their voice. Very much a big part of the sunken place to me is the silencing of the voice, the silencing of our screams. What we as a culture did to Colin Kaepernick for using his voice, the silencing of that voice, or the attempted silencing of that voice, and the beauty of course what many great civil rights leaders, specifically Martin Luther King Jr., taught us is that our voices are the weapons we have against violence, against oppression, against hatred. So the silencing of that voice comes in prison, it comes in athletes, it comes in the lack of representation of Black people in horror movies,
right,
and any part of this industry. So it also was not an accident that the sunken place is it's a theater where Black people are relegated to scream at the screen, get out. We are in pain here. We are headed towards pain, and we're not. Our voices aren't being portrayed. Our voices aren't being heard on the other side of that screen. So, to me, it's actually a very broad term, but it's the system. It's the system. The other interesting sort of offshoot idea that, I've joked about the sunken place a few times on Twitter, that is this idea, and I kind of regret it a little bit because I think people take the sunken place to mean something slightly different than what I was just describing, and that is the notion that the sunken place is meant to describe a Black person who is complicit in white racism, which I think is part of it.
Yes.
But I do not. I do not think that. I think that is too limited a way. People just going, "Oh, he's in the sunken place. He's in the sunken place," because he. I think it is a limited way to look at it. In fact, it is bigger than that.
Absolutely, yes. Well, your film starts with big ideas. I have a screenplay that's available online, and I don't know if you've seen that version that's online specifically, but it starts with a biblical quote from Romans. I won't quote the entire quote because it's a rather lengthy quote, but it's this idea of the bodies as the living sacrifice. So obviously this was a driving theme to you. I don't know if that quote came to you at the beginning or you just put that, because sometimes for me, those epigraphs are the thing that help drive the vision for a piece, or did that come later? What was in your mind at the very beginning?
It wasn't intended to go on the screen. It looked like you were either speaking to yourself or you were speaking to the reader, the executives, rather than saying this is going to be on the screen for the viewers.
It was originally meant to be on screen, but as I got to the end of the film, I felt like it was maybe a little bit. It was not needed, and it was maybe muddling the elegance of the way I opened the film. Mm-hmm. The reason I had that in there was, first of all, for the tone. It helped me set the tone, because you have to remember, before this movie, before I wrote this movie, it was an idea, and it was even I had to kind of like figure out how do you make something that is on one hand this satirical deal with something so serious and so grounded. And so there was something about starting with a biblical passage that for helped me understand the tone of what this movie was going to be, and that is something that is real and taken very seriously. Now, obviously, the quote deals with the idea of sacrifice, the idea of bodies. I didn't go dig too deep into how what it meant. I just sort of found that it worked and it conjured some of the imagery I was going to then pay off at the end of the movie. And then I also wanted to pay tribute to, and the movie, I didn't go too deep into it, but underneath there is this, Christianity is a theme in this movie, right?
Yeah, please, yes. Go there.
Well, okay, so, first of all, my lead character's name is Chris, and he ends up, in the original movie, he ended up going to jail at the end of the movie, after being stabbed in the hand. He was also shot in the side in the original script, and he had the marking of drawn on his head of where his head was going to be cut off. So I had and that was the sort of crown of thorns, right?
Wow.
So I had all this going on, and ultimately he was sacrificing his freedom and his life for for his people. And at the end of the original version, he resigns to that fact. He knows that that's what he's supposed to be. On the parallel track, you have the villains in this movie, who had constructed a whole mythology of why they were, of how they are a secret society that is this corrupted, dark offset of what was originally the Knights Templar, who, of course, is this warlike group of Christian knights who launched many crusades against brown people and collected artifacts, including reportedly the Holy Grail, which possesses the power of immortality, and this idea that after losing the Holy Grail, this faction of the now defunct or disbanded, really they were killed, right? They were burned at the stake. But the ones that were remaining became obsessed with achieving the power that the Holy Grail provided, since they lost it, and so the coagula was ultimately how they found, through science and through science experimentation, they replicated that power. So the coagula is immortality. They could theoretically put their brains over and over again in different people's bodies. So, yeah.
Nice.
I assume that you had the part of that backstory was how legally they would get away with this. In other words, if this woman's husband disappears and here's this black guy, who's suddenly signing all his documents, I would assume that among this group there are lawyers and doctors and so forth. So they're protecting each other and making it all work.
Well, that is, the legacy and entitlement and all that is such a part of the system. It's such an enormous part. And the idea that, this guy, he could get his psychopath son into med school and blink of an eye.
Right.
He doesn't seem like a med student.
No, he doesn't.
What? But we're real quick. I once had a really heartbreaking line. The script went through so many different iterations. And, that moment when Chris asks Jim Hudson, why black people? The moment the movie is leading up to, why black people? And, I think the what I have in there, of course, is he responds, who knows? Some people want to be cooler, stronger, faster, blah, 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 da-da-da. This idea of, all the many reasons that, white people might covet a black body, and I think that is, I think that is the right move to make in this script. There was a while where the answer to that question, to what you're sort of suggesting, Steve, or saying, Steve, the answer to that question was because black people disappear easier. And it was, I evolved that because it made me want to cry every time I got to that point in the movie.
Yes.
And you imply that, there was coverage of Andre's disappearance, but not any real serious effort, it would seem, to find him.
Speaking of disappearances, when I heard something, one of our students said something that was kind of interesting, that Rose defending Chris to the cop on the road was actually her attempt to keep his name off the record. Mm-hmm. And would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That's it. And she even, in that scene when she gets the cop to go away, you can even see in her smile, the way she looks at him, there's this little, check, got mission accomplished.
Yes.
So that was a part of it.
Great.
One of our other students, Ramona, asked a little bit about your company. One of the things I really admire about you is not only that here you are as an artist bringing out your voice and stories, but you're encouraging other creatives to get in the mix, and you'd really like to sort of transform the entire game. So she was asking, in terms of Monkey Paw, she was just curious how you're looking at
what are your plans?
Finding new talent. Is there a plan in effect? Are you going to have contests? What kinds of things is Monkey Paw planning to do?
Well, yeah, and the idea to me, what I realized, and you guys are both really amazing exceptions to this. And there are many other amazing exceptions, but as our culture has kind of expected black people to tell our truths in the form of drama. Mm-hmm. And that I think there's because of the comfortableness of dealing with pain with reverence or perceived reverence of drama. And to me, that sort of excludes the African American experience from really beautiful genres, and genres that make more money than drama, if done right. So that's the problem I'm trying to rectify. And so my mission statement is to say, not interested in drama. I'm going to try to help inspire and try to help encourage and try to help produce stories about by black people that may be specifically about race, could be completely not about race, but are in these fun, heightened, elevated fantasy worlds. And it turns out, the world is gaga over it because we haven't gotten it. This is why Black Panther is going to be what Black Panther is going to be. This is why Wrinkle in Time is going to be what Wrinkle in Time is. Right now I'm working on developing I can't talk about it too much because I don't want to misspeak, but developing a contest that will allow people to make short films because young people, because what I find is, as I'm looking for talent in this industry, there's nothing more helpful than an example of what somebody can do. And so I think the most valuable thing you can give somebody is experience in the field that they're passionate about, and then something to take from that experience and show people on their journeys to continue it. So that's the first stop with young people is going to be something where I will hopefully be able to help them make shorts.
That's great.
Short.
You've got your leverage. We like to ask a question. What question are we not asking? What question have you not been asked about this entire process?
As a final question.
Yeah, that's our final question. What do you want? Where do you want to go, and that nobody's ever taken you in these interviews?
Wow.
Have you heard it all at this point?
No way. Cannot possibly be.
It does. I mean, I've been talking about this movie since, before February, and many years before that, as I was trying to, convince people that it was going to be cool. But yeah, I think. I think there's a piece of the reaction to this where I can feel, people saying, what's the next Get Out? What's the next, people, and I hear these murmurings of the industry, like people are asking, what's the next Get Out? And I think it's important to note that the thing that made Get Out is that it had no business existing.
Exactly.
When I thought of it, and when I was making it was an idea that was not was not producible. It broke the rules. And so what I would say to people who are thinking, what's my Get Out, is think of what that next thing is. That's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's think of what think of what we're not supposed to be doing. You give your imagination an impossible task to work out, and then give yourself the time to work it out. And that's why, when by the time this movie came out, there was this convergence with time. Our culture had evolved, for the worse. But in that, the racial dynamic took many steps backward in this country. Although, there's argument to say, I love when Obama says, progress isn't a straight line. It's not. And I do believe that, I'm more afraid. I'm less afraid of the person that calls me the N-word than the silent person who's thinking it.
Yes.
And that I'm jumping all over the place. That right now, in this time where it feels like we're stepping backwards, in so many ways we are, with policy and with murder and violence, that the fact that conversation is happening now, albeit unpleasant, is going to end up moving us in the direction of progress.
Yes, I agree.
Right on. And anyway, looping back, I would just say, when you're thinking about what project you want to make that is your Get Out, think about what the world's not ready for yet. By the time you're done, the world's going to be ready for it.
I love that.
I cannot help but ask, would President Obama say goodbye to our students?
I'll always be out here. I may be windsurfing, but remember. I'll never really say goodbye. Always in your hearts, always in your minds. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jordan.
Thanks to both of you for that great
You contain multitudes, my friend.
And we appreciate it. Enjoy your day. Hope you get some time off between now and the Oscars.
All right, well, I'll try. Yeah, right. I'm hard at work on this next one. So.
All right. Okay. Bye-bye.